You are listening to Here Before, Here Now, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hey guys, Colton here with another episode of Here Before, Here Now. Thanks so much for joining us and streaming from wherever you get your podcasts. Today I am interviewing Indigenous Affairs reporter Shondiin Silversmith. I've been reading her byline for several years now, and she is a journalist who is actually leaving the business. So when I saw her post on Instagram, I knew that I had to get her on the show before she moved away from the Valley. So without any further ado, Shondiin Silversmith, thank you so much for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yat she Shondiin Silversmith in she honogani in shle kia ani bashichin bilagana dashache todachini dashanella. My name is Shondiin Silversmith. I'm an Indigenous Affairs reporter for the Navajo Nation.
I saw your post a few weeks ago that said you were leaving the industry. Why is that? What made you make the decision?
So I don't think I'm going to be leaving forever. I'm taking a step back from being an active role in journalism. I've been a reporter for the past 15 years. I've been actively working in journalism for the past 15 years. And the decision to take a step back from this part of my career was unexpected, but an opportunity came up that I wasn't looking for, and it worked out. And now I'm shifting my focus from Indigenous Affairs reporting to more of like an academic setting, I guess you could say. So a lot of the work that I'll be doing will focus on still uplifting Indigenous voices and Indigenous communities, but it won't be in the capacity of journalism. It won't be me being in these communities, interviewing people, telling their stories and helping them tell their stories. It's going to be more along the lines of I get to read people's manuscripts and hopefully publish their books one day. So that's going to be an interesting transition, but it's definitely not journalism. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, it was an opportunity I wasn't looking for, but it kind of happened, and we'll see what
happens, right? Just go where the wind takes you. So
Indeed.
Take me back. So you said you're moving back to the Navajo Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where you're from? Were you born and raised there?
I was born and raised in a small community called Steamboat, Arizona. My family is originally from there. My mom is from that area. My dad is originally from Manuelito, New Mexico. But I grew up on the res. I spent my K through 12 education there. I started my college education at Dede College, and then just moved up from there. But yeah, the res is my home. Mm-hmm. Steamboat is my home. I have a house there. So living in cities that I've been in for the past 10 years was never really permanent. It was always this stepping point where I needed to be to kind of help me move through my career, whether it was when I was in grad school in Boston or whether I was working at the Arizona Republic and the Arizona Mirror here in Phoenix. So it was just I always knew it was temporary. So the new opportunity I got allows me to go home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was always my goal, is I wanted to go home. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. I mean, when things happen the way they're supposed to, hopefully you just lead with your heart and it all works out, right?
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a journalist?
No. So I started my college career trying to be a nurse. So I spent 2 years actively working to want to be in a nursing program. But when a friend of mine who was my roommate at Dede College, she already knew she wanted to be a journalist, and she already knew that she wanted to do that type of work. I always wrote. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I journaled my entire life, but it was never something that I knew could be a career until she was like, I'm going to write this article for the Navajo Times, and I'd like you to help me do that if you're interested. And I said, why not? Mm-hmm. So we covered a punk rock show in Chinle, Arizona. This was in the 2000s. It was a long time ago. And that experience is what spearheaded my this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
The experience of going there, attending the show, talking to people there, talking to the band, and then sitting down and writing about it to kind of share this experience with people who weren't there, but also to kind of like keep it as a memory for people, because it's for some people it's like their first clip or their first time experiencing it, I think. So when I went through that process, it just clicked, and I was like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do this. And it kind of snowballed from there. I ended up going to UNM, and then after that I went to Northeastern University, and now I'm at ASU. But every like opportunity that I've taken has always been centralized of like, I want to be a journalist, but I want to be a journalist that covers my own community,
Right.
and covers stories about people like me. Because growing up on the res, there was always the Navajo Times or like the Gallup Independent. Those are very centralized and local newspapers that uplift Indigenous voices. That's the type of news I was surrounded by. But as soon as you leave those areas and you're in Phoenix or you're in Albuquerque or you're in Boston or you're in all of these other places, there's no stories about people like you.
Yeah. No, I get that.
So that was one of the things that I noticed when I started actively trying to be a part of what journalism as an institution is. And I was like, okay, you guys don't really have space for the type of reporting I want to do, but this is the type of reporting I want to do. So that was always just the goal, is kind of like actively advocate to tell Indigenous stories and uplift Indigenous voices in that way.
Yeah. What happened to the other girl? Did she become a journalist too?
She did. She did
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
She did for a while, but she was more of she was more free spirited than I am. So she's still a friend, and I still see the work that she does. But yeah, definitely, it was surprising how our paths in journalism were so drastically different. But yeah.
It's funny to talk about journalism as a field, because I, like you, I mean, I grew up here in Phoenix. My mom is from Lakachika. My dad was from Pinyon. And so I was, an urban Indian. You know, I go up there, they always call me like city kid, and, but I always was the kid with the camcorder. I had a camcorder. I was like movies and the canals and the ditches with my friends and my cousins up there. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to create. I want to do things. Here in Phoenix, same situation. Like, I think there was a reporter, an anchor, Mary Kim Titla, who was kind of spearheading journalism for Native communities. And then we had Andy Harvey, who was also a reporter for Channel 12, who passed away several years ago. He was my mentor, one of my mentors. I got my master's at ASU also. And I did a documentary about Natives in TV news and the lack of representation and how our voices lose out. And I always made it my mission to tell these stories. And one of the things that I have been so grateful and blessed with is most of the stories that I pitched in the newsrooms that I've worked in, they've been, oh yeah, we'll do this. I mean, a couple of times, especially during my first part of my career, they'd be like, well, who cares? This is such a small part of our community. As an adult, I'd be like, no, it's actually not. There's 22 tribes here in Arizona. There's like these stories have implications. Did you face a lot of adversity in trying to report on these communities?
So it's interesting because I didn't face a lot of adversity until I left this area, until I left the Navajo Nation, until I did that. And that was because Western journalism is different from Indigenous journalism and from the way that Indigenous journalists choose to tell stories and write about their communities and how they focus on their communities. So when I went into more of a Western viewpoint of what journalism is, especially because I got my master's degree at Northeastern University in Boston, first time I've ever lived in a city outside of the Navajo Nation or even just the border town of like Gallup.
Yeah, it's a shock. So it's a huge city. Yeah.
Huge culture shock. And it's crazy because like I started my career at the Navajo Times. I talked to people who did those journeys, who left the res and talked about the culture shock of what it's like to not be surrounded by your people constantly or your community or your culture constantly. And I was like, I always thought to myself, I was like, I don't know if I will feel that if I leave, because for a lot of Native kids, leaving the res is kind of the goal. You want to be able to go out and experience your life. So that's what I was looking forward to. But as soon as I drove into Boston and saw those city lights, I just remember looking at my husband. I was like, I want to go home.
Oh man, yeah.
And
especially Boston, that's completely different.
So but being there was the only time that I ever really faced that adversity towards like, well, nobody knows about these communities, so why do you want to talk about them? Or like, this doesn't relate to your readership, or this doesn't relate to your audience, so why should we care about it? Let me prove it to you. Let me make you care. Let me show you why these stories matter. Let me pursue this and write the story and then show you why it matters, because Indigenous people are a part of your community. They are in cities all across the country. There are tribes in nearly every state across this country. We have over 570 tribes, federally recognized tribes in the United States alone. So when news organizations do not actively try to incorporate stories about the demographics of their community, then they're doing it injustice to their readers. So when I was at the university, it was very much in a program that was geared towards like that Western perspective of journalists. The first thing my journalism professor said to me is like, I don't want you to be an Indigenous journalist. I want you to just be a journalist. I'm like, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
So going into that program when you already felt that kind of push, like, well, we want you to convert into what Western journalism is. We are going to push you into what the Western perspective of journalism is. It's hard. It gets complicated and it gets frustrating because you are that individual where you end up doing Native 101. Like, you should know this already. You have Indigenous people. There are Indigenous communities. We've been a part of this land and this community since time immemorial. You should know these things. But then you're actively re-educating people about what Indigenous communities are, who Indigenous people are. And then I'm like, I'm Navajo. I can talk to my experience, but we're all different, and Indigenous people are not monolithic. So you're like, this is just from my experience, but you guys are on the East Coast. You're in Massachusetts. You have tribes here. The Wampanoag tribe was one of the first tribes to be hit by colonization, and you have that community here. You should learn about them. But I remember how it was when my professors were like, what does this have to do with Boston? What does this have to do with Massachusetts? The first story that I ever pitched that related to an Indigenous community was about the Wampanoag tribe. They have a language revitalization program within their community. They have it within their tribal community on their res, but also centers in the suburbs of Boston where they're trying to teach people how to speak Wampanoag.
And they didn't care for that?
No.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So my professor was like, you need to submit a different pitch. No one's going to care about this. You need to submit a pitch that will relate to your readership here in Boston and people will care about. And it's kind of funny because I still did that story. I did it for PRI's The World, and it got published, and I was the only one in my cohort that pitched my story, and it did get published. So I'm like, you see, this is why
it's needed.
You should let people who want to cover their own communities or cover underrepresented communities the opportunity to prove why their stories matter and why you should be paying attention to them. So,
When it comes to the differences between Western journalism and Indigenous journalism, what are some of the things that you notice are the differences?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I, at least from my perspective, is that Western journalism is really built around this concept of extraction, where I understand news happens fast, you have to go in, get a story, leave quickly, and things like that. Yes, that's just the fact. But when you are dealing with underrepresented communities who are not often shown in news or have stories written about them, that tactic doesn't work. That tactic isn't always helpful. And that's why a lot of Indigenous communities don't trust the media, is because they are used to that type of expulsion or exploitation. Yeah, because they often have people who don't understand their communities or who are not familiar with them come in, take these stories, write them, but never come back.
Yeah, right.
So it's a very extractive
parachute journalism.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very extractive way of reporting, and that's just how Western journalism is. And the key difference when you look at the way Indigenous journalists approach their own communities or approach communities like their own, it's more of a collaborative effort. It's more of, how can I help you tell this story? Or how can we work together to tell this story? Because ultimately, journalists don't want to cause harm. That's one of the fundamental elements of journalism, is not to cause harm. So I think when it comes to Indigenous journalism, they rely on the experiences of being Native and the experiences of understanding what Indigenous history and communities have gone through to help them navigate their way through this type of storytelling, because you want to be able to work with the communities and work with the people to uplift their own voices. And for me, that's kind of always been the goal. It's never been about me. It's always been about, how can I help you tell this story? Or how can I help you get this story in front of people? What ways can we work together to do that? Or what ways can I do that for you? I was like, because this is ultimately your story, I just really want to help you tell it, or you're going to allow me the privilege to help you tell it. So it's interesting because it's very community driven. I think Indigenous journalism is very community driven because you want to be able to, like I said, work with these communities to uplift their own stories and showcase, like, yeah, this is why you should be paying attention.
What's amazing to me is when I started in this career too, like I always wanted to be a journalist. Growing up as a kid, you know, I cited a couple of examples of journalists who are Native on the news here, but like when I was in school and when I was in college, there weren't any Native American journalists that I could really talk to or find locally, right? But I feel like in the last several years, there have been, I would say, an explosion of Indigenous journalists. I mean, there's, like you said, there's now titles, Indian Affairs reporter, Indigenous journalist. I've spoken to many of them now on the show, which is showing there's like this commitment to telling these stories. Do you think that commitment will continue, or do you see diverse voices kind of going back?
Well, so one of the interesting things is like there's still no like national desk from like any legacy media outlet that has an Indigenous Affairs reporter, but you do have outlets like the Associated Press or High Country News or even Indian Country Today that focus on Indigenous journalism. They focus on telling stories about Indigenous communities, and they have Native reporters who are doing that, but also you have non-Native reporters who have committed to this type of work because they've built a community within Indigenous communities, or they've understand how to report these stories respectfully. So like, but you're right, there has been a huge shift within at least the past 10 years in Indigenous journalism, because you have not only more Native journalists stepping up to do this type of work, but you have them also advocating for it at a higher level. You have them advocating for it in their own newsrooms where they're like, we may not have a beat, but I want to include Indigenous stories within my coverage. So that, and I think that is vital. You have a lot of Indigenous reporters who are on a local level, whether it's at their tribal newspaper or their regional newspaper or even their small local newspapers. They are there doing the work to share these stories because it's important. I remember when I started working at the Arizona Republic, they didn't have an Indigenous Affairs beat established, and it's the state's largest newspaper, and you cover the state. But how can you say you accurately cover the state when you are leaving out an entire demographic of people? Because Arizona has 22 federally recognized tribes. They also have, Phoenix has probably one of the largest Indigenous populations in the country outside of like LA or New York. So you can't ignore those things. You can't deny that there are stories there when you have it's surrounding you. Phoenix is on the traditional homelands of the O'odham people and the Peeposh people. You have the Salt River Indian community that is bordering Scottsdale, then the Gila River Indian community bordering Levine and Casa Grande, and then Auction. Those are all within driving distance of Phoenix. You can't ignore that. You can't ignore that tribes play a vital role in the way that states operate because they contribute to state and federal entities.
When it comes to the changes in the journalism field, Arizona Republic no longer printed in Arizona anymore. A lot of its staff took those buyouts recently. A lot of people getting their news differently. Not even traditional broadcast news where I work for. I mean, they're looking for niche podcasts or niche publications. Do you see that helping or hurting the Indigenous narrative going forward for the masses?
So I think there's two ways to look at this. There's two ways of how Indigenous communities actively get their news, because news deserts have been a part of Indigenous communities for a really long time. A lot of tribes don't have their own tribal paper or don't have access to news the same way as just regular communities. So I think when it comes to tribally operated newspapers like O'odham Action News or the Navajo Times, they are directly serving their communities. They actively put out news to serve their communities because that is who they cover. And then you have larger entities like the Arizona Mirror, because they do intend on keeping the Indigenous Affairs beat, at least as far as I know. So when they refill that position, they're still committed to covering tribes. The Arizona Republic has two Indigenous Affairs reporter, one that is very environmental focused, and then the other who is a general beats reporter. So when you have people who are actively within these newsrooms that want to bring these stories forward, they are going to find ways to get these stories in front of you. You've shifted in a lot of different ways to be able to bring your stories in front of people. And for me, I feel like, it's required for journalists now to be a multimedia reporter, to whether it's doing audio, doing video, or doing just print. I was like, but you should have the ability to shift with the way news is being told. Because like I have two teenagers and they don't read the newspaper. They don't.
My wife doesn't watch the news.
Yeah, they don't.
She gets
watch,
podcasts.
Yeah, they don't watch TV. The only time they ever watch TV is when they're at home with grandma and she has the news playing in the background. But people shift. So either whether they're going through getting their news on TikTok or on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever social media platform that actively allows them to scroll, you still have all of these news organizations who are trying to figure out the best way to cater to these changes.
Right. And
that's just the reality of it. And I feel for Indigenous journalists, because there's still not a lot of us. There's still not a lot of Indigenous journalists, but they're out there in some shape or form, whether they're utilizing their own platforms to share their stories or they're utilizing their tribal platforms or their work platforms, but they are actively making that effort to connect with their own community and their audience in some way.
Yeah, a native TikTok is always fun to scroll.
It is.
You see all these. One of my cousins, he's on TikTok and he's got like hundreds of thousands of views, and oh my gosh, I'm like, this guy is like, I think gone viral several times, and I'm like, wow, people are watching him. They're not watching me to that degree. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it's crazy to think it's such a huge platform that he has, which is incredible. But there's just this responsibility of like, let's get the facts out there. Let's get news out there, because in this echo chamber world that we live in now, facts can be distorted, but like that's what I guess our traditional media side still strives for.
The fundamental parts of journalism are valid, reporting the facts and making sure that you support these facts with the sources and resources that you have. And it's important because that's the way to appropriately put information in front of people. Because like you said, we now live in this time where misinformation and disinformation are so rapid and can be all consuming. It could twist topics, it could twist stories. Just like you said, if one post goes viral, that changes the entire narrative of what is happening. So yeah, the fundamental principles of what makes journalism different from commentary or from just rehashing news articles that you read is that you have journalists actively looking and reporting those facts, actively trying to show you this is what we found when we did the interviews, when we looked through the documents, when we did the reporting, and we're presenting these facts to you. How you interpret it is your own doing, but this is what we found to lay out in front of you for you to be able to consume yourself.
When we look back at your career, is there like one story that, I don't know, maybe keeps you up at night or that you still go back to that you wish you could have done differently?
I think, so I'm not going to span my whole career. I think probably just within the past 2 years, it's definitely the sober living scams. I feel that there was a lot there that could have been reported out more than I was capable of doing in my time at the Arizona Mirror. And so that's definitely one, because even though I have covered Indigenous affairs for a long time, this is still my community. These are real people that are impacted by these things. I've gone out with volunteers and seen what this has done to Indigenous people and to our community, and that really does impact you. So that's one that I can think of just at least within the last few years. And one that I most recently did was the series that I published in January about the uranium haul route. I wanted to, that was an interesting story to report on because I traveled the entire route and I got to talk to different people. I think one of the things that I would have done differently is I would have taken more time to meet with community members, because I was driving the route and I would stop at like the flea market or the chapter house, or even sometimes at a house that was just on the road along the route, and try to talk to people. But I only did it in the span of like a couple of days. So I think that type of reporting requires a lot more time.
Yeah.
So most of it is just like, if I had more time to do it, or if I
always, right?
Yeah. If I had like, if there was the luxury of like, you have 1 month to work on this story, go do that. You don't have to worry about any other reporting or breaking news happening this month. You have 1 month to just focus strictly on this story and topic. Go do it. And then, yeah, I think it would, because I think a lot of great reporting comes out of that when you have the time to do it and the resources to commit to doing that type of reporting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, as the mother of teenagers, what do your kids want to do? Do they want to go into journalism?
No. And I'm not. It's fine. And
I told my son, I want you to be a doctor.
Yeah, that's funny because so they're my niece and nephew, but they're my kids. They've been living with me, and I've been taking care of them for the last couple of years. So I see them as my kids. My daughter, she's a junior in high school now, but she is a lot further along in terms of like what she wants to do with her life than I remember being as a junior, because she's actively like, I'm taking all of these honor classes, these AP classes. I'm going to be a part of the Phoenix Youth Council. I'm going to go be a part of all of this stuff to help me like solidify my college application so it's amazing. And I'm like, great. How can I help you do that? Yeah. I was like, I'll drive you these places. I was like, so, but she already knows what she wants to do. She wants to go to medical school and she wants to be a surgeon. So she's like actively planning out like what steps she needs to do to be able to do that. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that, but I know what it's like going to college, so I'll help you any way that I can. I was like, so let's figure that out. And my son, he's a senior now, so he graduates in May. And he's very opposite of his sister. He's like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. You still have some time, but I hope you realize as soon as you graduate high school, welcome to adult life.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh.
I was like, I'll help you in whatever way I can, but hopefully you'll have some idea by the time you graduate what you want to do with your life. So, but yeah.
I know. Oh my gosh. I wish sometimes to go back,
Yeah.
All this adulting is so hard.
It's funny because when I graduated from high school, I didn't think about college. I didn't know college was an option, but my mom, I remember my mom literally coming into the house one day and she's like, get your stuff. I am taking you to enroll in college. I was like, what? And then she drove me all the way to Jeanette College, and then she dropped me off and she was like, go figure it out. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, and that's just how it went. And I ended up going to school at Jeanette College for a couple of years, and then everything else happened after that. And it's just been on the go ever since.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, both my parents went to trade schools. So as a cosmetologist, my dad was a mechanic. And so like college for me wasn't ever really talked about. Like it just wasn't. Like I think my mom was like, oh yeah, we could get a job, And I had no idea what the difference between an undergrad and a graduate degree was. I went to an ASU, what do you call it? They came to my school in high school. And I was a good student. So like they came in and they're like, if you guys are interested, you guys are automatically qualified to get admission. And I said, okay, I guess I'll go, and it was more like proactive on my end on that point. But, I had no idea about like how that experience was going to be. So navigating those waters for my kids, I mean, I'll probably be more annoying about it.
Yeah. And I think that's justifiable because I feel like I know how hard it was to do it yourself. Like, I know how hard it is to navigate through an educational system that honestly is not really on your side.
Right.
And so I'm like, I want to make this as easy for you as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know what it takes to get into like medical school, and I don't know what it takes to become a doctor, but I will do the research to help you figure that out.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, that's how I can help you. I was like, I can help support you in that way and figure that out in that way. But in reality, I feel like my help can only go so far. In the end, it's up to you. It's up to you to take these steps and to make sure that you are in the right position to get what you want and to do what you want. So that's what I'm like. I hope you're ready for that because I was like, you're a junior. You still have a year left, but it's going to come fast.
Yeah.
I think my son realized that it came fast because when he was a junior, he was like, I have time. Right. I was like, you're a senior now. So where's all that time? And he's like, I got it. I was like, okay.
It goes by fast.
Yeah.
It really does. So what's, you're getting your PhD from ASU?
I am. So I'm getting my PhD in journalism, and my research focuses on the fundamentals of journalism in connection with Indigenous standpoint. So I want to be able to look into how Indigenous journalists utilize their own traditional knowledge within their work, and how the fundamentals of how they do their journalism can benefit Western journalism, how they take these lessons that they learn from their communities or from reporting on their communities, and how that community-driven method of journalism can benefit the Western perspectives of journalism. So, yeah, it's more of like this is an Indigenous standpoint. This is how it can help a Western perspective.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, more understanding, more compassion, more knowledge.
So it'll be interesting. I'm in my final year, and I'm at that stage of my PhD where it's like I have my proposal. Now I need to do the research and then write the actual dissertation. So,
would you recommend a PhD?
No.
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 Okay.
No. I think so. This is my perspective. Unless you want to be in academia and you see that as your endpoint, where you are like, I can see myself being a tenure professor, I can see myself doing a lot of research for a college or a university, then yeah, go get your PhD, because that's the minimum requirement to be able to do those things. But for me, I'm a journalist. I'm like a working journalist. I've always been like, I'm going to go out to these communities and report on them. I'm going to go out and do this work and write these stories and utilize these methods in real time, because that's what I did. So that has been like the biggest, I guess, struggle for me, is because I'm actively doing the work as an Indigenous journalist while trying to research what it means to do that type of work. And so in academia's phrasing and writing style is so different from journalism. It's so
clunky.
Yes. That, but also I'm like, why are you guys talking so much?
Yeah.
I could tell you what I'm doing in less than the amount of pages of this paper you want me to. I was like, why do you want 20 pages when I can tell you what I'm doing in like 5?
Right. Yeah. Succinct.
Yeah. So that's been the biggest struggle on a logistics level, is like, you need to write like an academic, and that is very wordy, and that is so different than being a journalist, where I'm like, this is what I found, and here's what it means.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being a guest here, and good luck on this next chapter.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, maybe we'll see a byline from you in the future.
Yeah. We'll see. I know journalism is always something I can come back to, and I feel when I've settled down in this new role that I'm taking, and I'm in a position where I'm like, hey, maybe I'll freelance for a bit and get my toes wet again and go out and do some reporting. I'm like, I know that's a real option for me. So that's kind of what has made this transition a little easier, because I'm like, I remember when I started thinking about it, I'm like, Shondiin, you're not going to be a reporter anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not going to go out and talk to people anymore. I feel like that was the hardest part of being like, I'm leaving the Arizona Mirror. It's not so much of like, I'm leaving a job. It's the like, oh, I don't get to tell these stories anymore. Yeah. So that's been the part that's been like, okay, it'll be fine. You can come back to it.
Yeah.
In the future, it'll always be there.
Absolutely. I have a feeling we'll see a byline from you still to come.
For sure.
All right. Well, Shondiin, thank you so much for being a guest on the show here. Thanks so much for listening wherever you get your podcasts. This is Here Before, Here Now. Until next time.
You are listening to Here Before, Here Now, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.